Morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. Seem to get wheeled out every Christmas to give a sermon, and I always wonder, what did I talk about last year? Because I don't want to repeat myself. I hate repeating myself. And I asked Chris, what did I talk about last year? And he said, you didn't say anything last year. Oh, okay. Because it was cancelled. Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. So I'm sure nobody remembers from the year before that. Anyway, I'm suffering a little bit from chemo brain at the moment, so if I forget your names and forget who I am, then please understand. So those are readings that Chris picked out, traditional Christian readings about the birth of Jesus, anticipating the birth of the Messiah, and at the time when the Messiah was born. And you can see the main title. They're incredibly political. Jesus referred to as the King of the Jews. And this anticipation that a king would be born, someone who would sit upon the throne of David and establish a world of righteousness and justice. And that's really the key, the Jewish understanding of the Messiah, is someone who brings world peace and a world of justice. And when you think about it, we often talk about spiritual and physical salvation, but there's almost no discussion about physical salvation. Salvation itself is people want to get saved from something. It's not really a biblical concern, to be honest. But anyway, morning. Physical salvation, in that sense, is very much like this idea of bringing a world of peace and justice. This is a biblical understanding, creating a world where there's no oppression, a world where there are no empires, a world where people aren't going around being exploited and mistreated in the way they are in many different countries. And so what the Jewish people were crying out for was a Messiah, someone who would come and liberate them so they could live a peaceful life, so they wouldn't be part of one person's empire after another person's empire, which was their experience for 1,000 years, just being part of people's empires. And it's really miserable to be part of somebody's empire. Being British, it's hard to appreciate that. But the people who were part of the British Empire said, well, actually, it was a really miserable experience. And nobody wants to be part of anybody else's empire. They want to be self-governing, to be able to take responsibility for their country. And it's not just the British who are imperialists. People tell me it's the English, and that Wales was their first colony. And then after that, it was Scotland, and then Ireland, and then, anyway. And there's a lot of historical resentment there. Because basically, people should be able to live, take responsibility for their own community and for their own country, and have their own customs, their own laws, their own rules, their own way of doing things, and to be at peace and to live at peace with each other. So that was always a great aspiration of the Bible, was the Messiah would come to bring about peace. So people could live in peace with each other, not have one great empire with the Messiah as the emperor. That's not a biblical idea. Just he'd become the king of Israel, that's all. And then every country would have their own kings, their own customs, their own traditions, their own way of life. And then people would live in peace with each other because they wouldn't go around thinking our way of life is better and you should all adopt our way of life, and to impose their way of life. So, of course, that was what empires have always done. Whereas the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, they went around imposing their traditions, their custom, their culture upon everybody else that they conquered, thinking that their way of doing things was the best and that everybody else should conform to their way of doing things. This universalism is totally different to the Mosaic vision at Sinai, where there'd be a nation within a certain boundary, a certain kind of borders, and it was very, people of Israel were told very strictly, Israel should not go beyond these borders. It has to be confined to these borders. And whereas usually when a country becomes very powerful, it decides it wants to expand its borders. It wants to start occupying the next door country and start to, make them all speak English or whatever language it is. And that also leads to a lot of problems. So I always, thinking about this more and more, often we think about physical salvation being to do with original sin. But personally, I think increasingly I've come to think about it as much more concerned about bringing about social, political, and economic transformation and change to create that kind of world. But then, of course, one has to think about, well, what are the bases for the social, political vision that one has? And, basically, Judaism's not a religion. Christianity is a religion. It's concerned about salvation. Am I going to go to heaven? What do I need to believe to go to heaven? I need to be born again, etc., and go to heaven. Buddhism is a religion. Lots of these are religions. Confucianism is not a religion, it's just a way of life. It's very different. Judaism, not a religion in that sense either. Judaism, the Bible, is a political project. How to create an ideal society. How to have this vision and to implement these vision in certain kind of laws. That's why there's so many laws in the Bible. It's all about trying to translate this vision into a reality. In our own spiritual community, we also need to think about this. We have this vision, 3 blessings, etc., but how much thought have we put into making this, translating this into a sort of social, political, communal kind of reality? And I remember years ago, Eileen Barker actually, she asked me, if you became the Prime Minister, what would you do? Or if unification members were elected and became in charge of the British government, what would you do? And I thought, what would we do? Well, we'd probably ban pornography and couldn't think of anything else really. And realized, if we did become running the country, actually it'd probably be a disaster because we wouldn't have any clear idea of what to do. So for me, this is really important to be thinking about these things, and also through education, thinking, okay, sometimes people would say, well, if the divine principle was taught in all the schools, that's the answer. Well, I was a school teacher, as a religious education teacher, and I thought, well, I'm going to test this to see if it works. I'm going to give a regular standard divine principle lecture to my teenagers, who I'm teaching in a class, 30, 15-year-olds. And so I got out there were the whiteboards already there, the pens, and gave a regular lecture. And within about 5 minutes, they're all shuffling uncomfortably on their seats. Within about 15 minutes, they were climbing the walls. And I realized it's too simplistic. Yeah? And, that's why one has to think about, okay, how are we going to translate this vision that we have into something that's viable, something that's usable, yeah? And so often become wedded to this divine principle, thinking that is the book, that is a text. But to be honest, there's so many mistakes in it, and it needs serious revision. The reason why nobody's bought it, the reason why you don't find it in the bookshops, the reason why nobody buys on Amazon, is because it's indigestible, and it needs serious revision and reworking so it becomes something that people can read and think, yeah, this makes sense. This helps me to live a good life. This helps me to think about how I might transform the society in which I'm living. And that was Jesus' entire concern, was how to deal with the political reality he found himself with. Did I ever talk to you about turning the other cheek? I can't remember now. I've forgotten most of the sermons I've given. Did I ever talk about turning the other cheek? Do you remember when I went around slapping people? No? Did anybody remember getting a slap from me? Not yet. Oh, well, David's waiting. As I said, Jesus was not a religious leader. He was a political leader. He was a politician trying to implement and deal with a reality that he found. The reality 2,000 years ago is a Roman occupation. And so he thought, how am I going to deal with this Roman occupation? What's my political program going to be? Translating Moses' teaching into reality for today. And so that's the whole basis of his teaching of turning the other cheek. Now, it's a Roman occupation, and the Romans were not very nice people. I was just about to give David a slap, but I see his grandson's on his... So that protected you. Okay, so I'll come over here. Anybody like a slap? Would you like a slap? No. And I said they weren't very nice people. People who occupy a country are really not nice. And the Romans are particularly harsh. And they looked down on the Jews with contempt for various reasons. They had complete contempt for the Jews. And the Jews, naturally enough, they hated the Romans. Anybody here who's Irish? How do you feel during the British occupation? Not too good, okay? If you remember. Okay, so the British didn't behave very well in Ireland. Okay, so if a Jew came along and upset a Roman soldier, then the Roman soldier would go like this, with his big, heavy leather glove. He'd go. And how do you feel if I slap you like that with the back of my hand? No, and you end up rolling in the dust. Okay? And how do you feel? Not happy. And what are you thinking?
Get him back.
I'll get him back. And so you think, well, I'm not going to get him back now because he'll just kill me. I'm going to, find out where he lives, and one dark night I'm going to go and slit his throat. Does that resolve the problem? No. Relationship between Jews and Romans. What's another way in which you can respond if somebody does that to you? You can think, well, this person, you're rolling in the dust, you think, wow, I better not upset the Romans anymore. Instead, I'm going to become, can't use that word here, I'm going to be obsequious. I'm going to just worship power. I'm going to humble myself to the Romans. I'm going to say how wonderful they are. I'm just going to, you know what I mean? You just humiliate yourself in front of power. So that's the alternative. Either get angry and want to get resentment, or you humiliate yourself in front of this Roman soldier and say, I'm really sorry for what I said. I really apologize. I'll never say that again. So does that mean the Roman respects a Jew more? No. Do you respect people who just grovel in front of you? No, you don't respect them at all. Okay, so you can't respect someone who's going to, so it doesn't resolve the problem just to go and fight back. So what did Jesus say? Jesus said, turn the other cheek. So when you hit somebody in the back of your hand, it's incredibly disrespectful. It's like, oh, you insect, you wormed out of the way. So that's when you hit someone with your that way. So what Jesus said was, turn the other cheek. So what Jesus is saying is, actually, stand up, look the Roman soldier in the eye, and turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Yeah? So now I can only hit with this hand. It's different being hit like this and being hit like this. No. On the inside, if you hit like this, you know that person just doesn't respect you. But if you slap like that, it means you're slapping someone who's your equal. And so what Jesus is saying by turning the other cheek was, don't get angry, don't get resentful, don't humiliate yourself and lose your dignity, but stand up and turn the other cheek and say, well, if you're Roman, if you're going to hit me, treat me as an equal. And then for the Roman, it's very difficult. He thinks, well, if I'm going to hit him with this like this, that means I'm acknowledging that he's my equal. Yeah? And that's very difficult for the Romans to do. At the same time, the Roman soldier thinks, my God, this person stood up and turned the other cheek. I couldn't do that. I would have just got angry, or I would have humiliated myself in front of power, which is what I do with my commanding officer. If he gets upset and angry with me, I go around groveling on the ground. This Jew is not groveling. He's not getting angry and trying to fight back against me. He's maintaining his dignity and saying, turn the other cheek. So from the Roman soldier's point of view, all he can do is respect that person. And so this is Jesus' way of trying to change the dynamic in the relationship between the Jews and Romans, where the Romans treated the Jews with contempt, the Jews hated the Romans. Jesus said, love your enemy. Okay, and so how do you love your enemy? Well, Jesus said, if a soldier asks you to carry his luggage for 1 mile, carry it for 2 miles. So suppose that's the law. A Roman soldier comes along and says to this person, carry my heavy rucksack for 1 mile. You might just popped out to go and buy some butter, and suddenly that's, your morning ruined, basically. And you can imagine then if a Roman soldier asked you to do that, you'd be really grumpy and really resentful that this person ruined your life, and you probably have to go and see the chiropractor afterwards, and et cetera, et cetera. So Jesus said, if someone asks you to do that, carry it for 2 miles. Well, what does that mean? And he said, next sentence, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. So how does that work? So when the Roman soldier comes along and says, carry my luggage for a mile, you don't say, oh no, I've got other things to do, can't you go and ask somebody else? You say, yes, I'll happily carry it for a mile. That's the law anyway, I might as well do it happily since I have to do it anyway. And so you're carrying this heavy, 50-kilogram rucksack, and you start, the Jewish person then starts to talk to the Roman soldier. How's your day? Have you just got off the train? Well, plane or camel. And where have you come from? Obviously you're not local. Where do you come from? Have you got family, you got children, wife, etc., etc.? What's your commanding officer like? And taking an interest in this Roman soldier. Doesn't mean you have to like them, but taking an interest. And you can imagine this Roman soldier thinking, well, this is an interesting person. He's not just grumpily carrying my luggage with a frown and a scowl on his face like everybody else. He's taking an interest in me. And then after a mile, this Jew then says, well, actually, he's a follower of Jesus, of course, I'll carry your luggage for another mile. And the Roman soldier thinks, this is really strange. And after a while, you can imagine the Roman soldier feeling really bad. This is a really nice person. He's a really genuine person. He's a wonderful person, and I've ruined his morning. Yeah? So you can imagine the Roman soldier's heart changing, thinking, wow, I've really ruined this person's morning. He's such a nice person. And I wish I had someone like this as a friend. How many people do I know who take such an interest in me? Many people do I know who are concerned about my problems, my difficulties, my family situation, my wretched commanding officer who's such a bully? How many people do I know who care about me as much as this stranger cares about me and takes an interest in me? Because that's what love is. If you love someone, it's taking an interest in them. Doesn't mean you have to like them, but you love them, you care about them. And then you can imagine then, after 2 miles, this Roman soldier thinking, I wish I had a friend like this. So he takes out his card and says, can we meet up next week? You're like my psychologist, you're like my counselor, you're like my advisor. You can help me. You're my savior. You're my, unification speak, you're my able figure. You can guide me and you can help me to resolve and solve all the problems I have within my inner life and my relationships. Can we meet up for Starbucks next week? There's a kosher one just around the corner. And then you can imagine then, okay, and Jew said, yeah. And would you like me to pray for you? Oh yes, would you pray for me? And then the Jewish person prays for this Roman soldier. And that's what Jesus said. Pray for those who persecute you. Pray for those that make your life miserable. And then through this, the Jewish person was having to change his relationship with a Roman and to care about them even if they didn't like them, to love them even though they were really brutal. And at the same time, through this, and the Roman soldiers' attitude towards this Jewish person and Jews generally would also change. And then through this, Jesus wanted Romans and Jews to become friends. That was his way of trying to resolve the reality of the situation which he found himself. Yeah? So that's his political project. He wasn't a religious teacher. Sometimes people think, it just means that's Jesus' teaching to love your enemies. Everything that Jesus said was particularly rooted and addressed to the political, economic, and social and religious reality that he found himself in. He wasn't teaching abstract truths. He wasn't teaching abstract principles. He was just teaching really concrete ways of dealing with reality and real problems. And that's what we ought to be, thinking about as well, about, being a blessing to others. So, as Jesus said, pray for those that persecute you. Bless this Roman, and so he told the Jewish people, go and bless these Roman soldiers. So, I'm going to read out to you now. I'm going to bless you. And this is the priestly blessing which God commanded Moses to give to the people of Israel, and is said, so I would imagine, every Sabbath The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you are to bless the Israelites. Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace." And that's what I wish you for this coming year, peace. As Father said, he was a global citizen, a man of peace. And that's what we should be as well. That's what Jesus taught, how to bring peace in the most miserable and difficult situation. And I'm sure we can try and do that in our families, in our communities, and with our neighbors too. God bless you. Have a wonderful Christmas and a very happy and wonderful New Year. And I'll see you at the same spot, same time, in a year's time.